What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Lil Maguizy channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at a man, or a boy, dressed in a spider suit who has to fight a man dressed in a bird suit. Let's do it, shall we? Spider-Man Homecoming, starring Tom Holland as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, Michael Keaton as Adrian Toomes / The Vulture, Zendaya as MJ, with Marissa Tomei as Aunt May, and Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark Iron Man. So basically, this shit starts off back in 2012 after the Battle of New York, where Adrian Toomes is, cleaning up everything. He's like scrap metal and stuff like that, and then some woman comes and is like, "Yeah, we got this. You don't have to do this anymore." And then he gets upset and then watches a thing about Tony Stark and decides to build weapons. And then 8 years later, which is weird because this takes place in 2017 or 2016. And 8 years after 2012 was 2020, and it's also not gonna make sense because 2020 it was a pandemic, so it's not really gonna make sense why there's a crowd of people. Anyway, 8 years later, he has this bird suit and it's like, it's time we change too. And then meanwhile, a film by Peter Parker shows like New York, Queens, it's home. And it's like, okay, that's weird. And then this is before Civil War, so he goes to Germany and then he has this homemade suit he puts on, and then Happy, he comes along and it's like, yeah, we're gonna show you the suit. And then they show the suit that he wore in Civil War, and then he takes a video, and during Civil War, Tony yells underoos, and that's what he yells. So basically, Spider-Man comes up, and then boom. And then about 2 months later, no, not about 2 months later, and then meanwhile, Tony is driving Peter back home. He allows him to keep the suit, and he will call him if there's any danger. 2 months later, he's sitting in a train going to school, no calls at all. And then he decides to leave the school and dress up as Spider-Man, and the Ramones are playing in the background. I don't even know what this montage is about, to be honest. And meanwhile, the sandwich place gets attacked, gets robbed, and then he comes, and then Spider-Man comes and saves them. And then he goes back at home, and then he crawls on the ceiling, closes the window, and then his mate is like, "Oh my god, you're Spider-Man." And yeah, that's that. And then May comes in, and Peter's naked. And so meanwhile, Peter and May are sitting out for dinner, and he tells them that he needs a new bag. Meanwhile, they go to school, and shit like that. And then Vulture is like, "Yeah, what about the spider dude?" And so then Peter finds this glowy thing and then does some shit with that. And then Peter and Ned go to a party. And then he dresses up as Spider-Man, but decides not to go back to the party. He decides to go fight some crime. And then he loses. And then Iron Man flies up and saves him. And then they have this argument, and then he was like, "You didn't have to come all the way up here. I was doing that on my own, I'm fine." And then it turns out that it was just a normal suit, and Tony wasn't even in. He was somewhere in like India, I'm guessing. And so that happens. Meanwhile, he has a crush on this girl called Liz. And then the Vulture is just doing stuff. And meanwhile, they're going to Washington, and his friends get stuck in the Washington Monument lift. Spider-Man comes and then saves them. And then meanwhile, he goes back home and then goes to a ferry. And then Tony Stark calls him, he's like, yeah, great job. What is going on? What are you doing? And then he fixes the ferry, because the ferry gets cut in half by a vulture. And then he fixes the boat, and then it doesn't work out. And then Iron Man comes and fixes the boat, but he's very angry at Peter because he disobeyed him. And so Tony has a stern talk with him and he takes the suit back. Meanwhile, he goes to prom with Liz, and it turns out, spoiler, is that his dad is actually the Vulture. People. His dad's actually the Vulture. And so, yeah, they go to prom, and then Vulture has this, dad talk, and he's like, if you touch her, I will kill you and everyone you love. You mess with me, I'll kill you and everyone you love. He loves Liz, so is he gonna kill his own daughter? And also, he's Batman, so why would you mess with him? So meanwhile, Peter runs away, puts his homemade suit on, fights the Vulture, and then they eventually scrap, and then Peter and the Vulture crash land on the beach, I'm guessing. It's nighttime. And then Peter ties up Adrian, and then Happy finds Adrian and arrests him. And meanwhile, back at school, Liz is leaving. She's leaving the school because her dad doesn't want her there during the trial. And so then Tony comes along. No, actually, Happy comes along, takes Peter over to the Avengers place. Tony decides, can they shut up? I might retake this. No, actually, no, I'm not. And then Tony decides to tell Peter he's a part of the Avengers and gives him this new Iron Spider suit, and he refuses. What was the point in wanting to do all that cool shit if you're not going to want? That was a waste. Absolute waste. As in, Peter leaves, and then Pepper comes and is like, what is going on? I had this big announcement, what am I gonna tell them now? And then Happy has a ring from 2008 and gives it to her, and then they probably make that night they're engaged. Meanwhile, Peter goes back home. He has a present from Tony, and it's his suit. And he's like, hallelujah, and then he takes off his mask, and Aunt May's in the background, and then she's like, yeah, Aunt May comes around, and she's like, what the f? And boom. After credit scene time, Adrian's in prison, and he has this guy who knows Spider-Man. He's like, if I knew who he was, he'd already be dead. Yeah. Second after credit scene, Captain America comes along. He's been in this thing a lot. He's doing like coachings on TV, and he's like, patience. This was disappointing. Also, the credits is like this animated thing. It's very cool. Overall thoughts, it's meh. I was pretty hyped when this movie first came out, but looking back, it's like meh, especially with a later Spider-Man movie. Yeah. Well, that was that. Join us next time where we take a look at a god and his brother and a big giant green monster having to attack a woman with a horny hat. That didn't sound right. Goodbye.